Christopher Johnson. We are live on Yonkers Voice. Honorable Christopher Johnson. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Christopher. Well, Christopher, thank you very much for making yourself available, so we can inform the people of Yonkers and Westchester County about your re-election bid and what's coming to Yonkers. But before we go there, let's talk about your prior election when you were first voted in, the things that you promised, the things that you were able to accomplish, the things that you were not, the challenges that you had and why, and what's coming up in the near future.
So for those that don't know, I was on the Yonkers City Council for 6 years. I got elected in 2011 to the council, started in 2012, and I represented the first district. And obviously, Getty Square in the downtown is a large part of the district. And so I saw what happens with our homeless population, to be honest, and goes on there. And I tried to do what I could at the city level and realized that a lot of that work happens at the county level. And so when Ken Jenkins moved on, I decided to take an opportunity in 2017 and run for county government. So there were three things generally, like on campaigns, you want to highlight three issues. One was obviously homeless population and in relation to affordable housing. Another one, I talked about indigent services and making sure that we provide counsel to individuals in our court systems. And then there was just the larger conversation about making sure that our parks and our other facilities that are county owned, that we get the services that we deserve.
Now, Chris, before we go much further, let's explain to the people of Yonkers, Lower Westchester County, what is your job? What is your job definition as county legislator? And the reason I'm asking you this is because somebody wanted to call you the other day and they asked me about your number. And I said, and what is the problem? Well, because they're not picking the garbage at my door. I said, okay, that's not Christopher Johnson anymore. Used to be when he was your council person. Right. Now you need to call the council person that represents you. So give us a definition of what it is. So your responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate that. So I'll start with legislator first, right? So a legislator on every level of government has the same job. It's twofold. One is to make sure that you pass laws that help the people you represent, and two is to pass a budget. So those are the basics, right? But then there's the county piece. And so if you're talking about things that you see every day, police, fire, sanitation, education, those are city issues. So you call your city council people. The state has oversight over a lot of that, like education, so on and so forth. But at the county level, it's mostly things that you don't see. So we have a sewage treatment plant here in Yonkers that takes a lot of crap, for lack of a better word, from other communities throughout the county. We have 2 county parks, Tibbetts Brook Park and Sprain Ridge, that we run, and those are county facilities. The B-Line, we contract out with the company to make sure that the buses are on schedule and that they run regularly. So those are the things that the county really takes care of. And then we have legislative items that, I'm sure you'll ask me about, that I'm really proud that we were able to push county-wide to make sure that those things occur. So, but unfortunately, the regular things that people think about on a daily basis, those are city issues most of the time.
Sustainable energy?
Right. So, I think each level of government has a role to play there, but absolutely, we're looking at making sure that county facilities have electric charging stations for, and we move buses to that as well. So there's work that we do there. But a lot of the things that we do, we pass a lot of bond acts for a lot of, roads, bridges. So when you cross a bridge in Westchester County, that's within Westchester. A lot of the times is a county bridge. Some of the parkways, so the Hutchinson River Parkway, the Bronx River Parkway, I think bridges that cross those are often our responsibility as well.
And also city streets that are responsibility of the county.
So there are some streets that are ours, and it gets really confusing in Yonkers because you could be on one road. I think Tuckahoe Road is an example where you're on one part of Tuckahoe Road, you're a city street, another part is a county road, and another part is a state road. So it gets kind of confusing. So we have what we call MOUs, agreements between the different levels of government on how they're maintained, because it doesn't make sense that the city would plow their section and then the state would plow its section and then the county would plow another section. We just all agree that the city will take care of it, and we make sure that the funds exist so that the city can do that.
Now, Chris, let's start about the things that you promised. Well, let me put it to you this way. When you ran for the position that you currently have, I'm sure that you made some promises, which I have them down here. You made some promises that you were going to work on it. They were your priorities. Of the priorities that you had when you first ran, talk to us about your accomplishments. Talk to us about the things that you were not able to accomplish and why you didn't, and your challenges.
I think obviously I mentioned Indigent Defense, and so for those who are not aware, that's providing attorneys to people who go to court. So when you hear your Miranda rights, you have the right to an attorney, and if you can't afford one, so we make sure that you have that. We do get reimbursed from the state, and so we're actually pushing back on the state right now to make sure that those funds are available. But I also expanded that specifically here in Yonkers to housing court. So if you get an eviction notice in Yonkers and you are within a certain income, you will automatically get an attorney when you go to appear in court. And that is a pilot program that started here in Yonkers because we recognize the reality that is affordable housing, or lack thereof, in Yonkers. And so then we've had the opportunity with my colleagues to expand that program. And now we're looking at, we're going to do a study into how much it would cost to make sure that would exist throughout the countywide. And we're also asking the state to just do it statewide so that we don't have to just do it in here in Westchester. We're not the only people that deserve housing. It should be a right for everyone. So that is one thing that I'm proud to say started in one area, but expanded and continues to be a force, and something that I'm proud of and I take full credit for. And then I think obviously our conversation about affordable housing. In our last budget, I put funding in to make sure that when we build new affordable units, that we can have broadband so that people can have access to the internet. And obviously we see now it's not just a nice to have, but the internet is utility. People need it. So we need to make sure that people have internet access where in their housing. And then the third thing, and I don't really like to make promises on the campaign trail, but I know that it's like part of the thing. But the third thing is our homelessness problem, which is not just a county issue, it's a national conversation that's taking place.
Chris, sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's stay in one thing and then we move to the homeless, because those were all things that we are going to talk about. That was
okay. Absolutely.
Internet access on buildings. Nowadays, that internet access is not much different than heat. We need internet on the buildings. Education depends on it. Lots of people that cannot afford, they cannot pay for a fast broadband. So kids are at home, and things have changed forever. Things have changed forever.
Absolutely.
No. So we need that in order to function. We need that.
And so what we see actually on the city level, right? I know that I believe Councilwoman Tasha Diaz is the chair of the Education Committee. And so she's had a lot of conversations about making sure that our children have tablets or laptops so that they can use at home, and not just one for a family, because if there's 5 kids, then how do 5 students use one device? It's not possible. And it saddens me because when I was on the city council, one of the conversations I had was making sure that, starting the transition from hardcover textbooks to tablets and to electronic use, devices for our youth to use in the education system. I wasn't able to continue that conversation, but I'm glad to say that, I was kind of ahead of the curve. And now we're at a place where it's clear that this is a reality. that everybody's experiencing, where we need to make sure that our children have access to these devices and that they can use it at home, which is where the making sure internet access is available in affordable units is possible.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm 100% correct, but I think I am. Attorney Sussman replied to Dr. Quesada in a communication that was sent in the last 3-4 weeks. And I believe that Dr. Quesada implied that the Board of Education is not on one-to-one education.
Right.
Well, if we have 3 or 4 kids in one household and the classes are all at the same time, then somebody is not going to have an education.
Right.
He's not able to log in and is going to have a non-present for that day because he wasn't able to log in. So something definitely needs to change. And I think that's where you come into place for the budget that it's necessary to fulfill those conditions. Am I correct or no?
Unfortunately, no. The county level is the one level of government that has almost zero impact on education. The only impact we have is Westchester Community College. And so I'm kind of disappointed that I gave up that opportunity to affect change in our education system directly, but I continue to advocate on behalf of our young people. I don't know if your viewers know, but I have my master's in school counseling, and I was a guidance counselor in the Yonkers Public Schools for a short period of time. So I know, what our young people go through on a daily basis. But unfortunately, as an elected official right now, I can't have that impact.
Well, I understand that. It's important that people understand what are the things that you get involved in and what are the things that you don't, because people in general might think, well, we voted him to help us find solutions. Okay, we didn't vote for him or other elected officials because they look good in that position. It's to find the solutions for the people. But we also need to understand what responsibilities each elected official have.
Yes.
Okay? Now, talk about housing. This might not be part of your responsibility, but at the same time it is. You live in Yonkers, correct, Chris?
Absolutely. On North Broadway.
So this might be part of your problem because besides being a legislator, you are also a Yonkers resident and you feel our problems as a resident of Yonkers.
Absolutely.
Might not be your job to resolve them, but you feel the problems. This is what's going on here in Yonkers to lots of people who live in buildings. They are not being evicted, but in one way, they are being retaliated against. And because the landlords know that courts are closed, building department is not responding as the way they are, so no repairs are being done. They've been living in conditions that are not correct. Repairs are not being done. Elevators are not being fixed because they know that there is no way of resolving. Courts are closed, so they're taking advantage of it. Nevertheless, every month they dare to collect the rent. Is this anything that involves you? Because it's legislation. I don't know if it's county, if it's just city. Tell us a little bit about that, sir.
So, I've had, and you're right that there are different levels of government, but I'm here to find out what the solutions are. And if I can't directly do it, then to talk to the individuals that can. So I know I've had conversations personally with the majority leader of the city council, Councilwoman Clarissa Pineda-Isaac, about putting more employees in the buildings department because that department needs to get beefed up so that they can get out there and make sure individuals are held responsible for the lack of work that they're doing in their buildings. I also voted on, when I was on the city council, the Bad Landlord Registry that the same councilwoman introduced to make sure that there was a list of people who were violating, that they would be found and people could know who they were. So I continue to work in that area. It's not something that I can directly have my hand on or I directly impact, but I look for ways to try and do that.
Chris, I don't think we need to launch a federal investigation on who they are. We know exactly who they are. So if a list is needed, you can contact me and I will provide you with the list of those landlords and a list of those that are being affected by those living conditions that the landlords are refusing to comply and repair. So we don't need to launch a federal investigation. We know who they are. We know who they are. Now, Chris, you being challenged for the legislator for the District 16. Okay.
Yes.
And people are going to vote based on record, based on who we feel is best for the job. If I'm a person that I am undecided on who should I vote for, why should I vote for you? Tell me, let's say we are having a private conversation and you are saying, Rue, this is why you should vote for me and not for my opponent.
So I would say that if you're going to vote based on record, that it's almost in my opinion, a no-brainer to vote for me. So I was the lead in our ban the box legislation. So if you go on a job interview in Westchester County, you used to get a job application, and some of them would have a question: have you ever been convicted of a crime? And we know what happens when you check yes. That goes into compartment 13, the garbage can, and you don't get an opportunity to even interview for that job. Well, I was the lead on making sure that that question is no longer allowed on job applications in Westchester County. So it is illegal in the first part of a job interview process to ask someone basically on the job application whether or not they've been convicted of a crime. I was also the lead sponsor on what we call the co-op disclosure bill. So we know that home ownership is expensive, but we also know that home ownership is the start to making access to affordable housing in this nation. And so the most inexpensive way to access housing is to purchase a co-op. But if you have a building that has been one ethnicity from the 1950s to today, it's probably not because people just didn't want to apply to that building or nobody else had the financial means to get into that building. There may be something else that's involved in that process. So what we did was we introduced and passed legislation, or I introduced legislation and we passed it as a board to make sure that if there are rejections, that information is passed on to the Human Rights Commission so that we can make sure there's no patterns of discrimination that exist in the purchasing of co-ops. Also, I was proud to vote for the Immigrant Protection Act that makes sure that individuals in Westchester County who are undocumented are dealt with if they encounter our law enforcement, that they're dealt with fairly, just as everyone else would be dealt with regard to the part of the law that they violated, and that communication with the federal government would only be as necessary based on the Constitution and federal law. And so those are just a few of the things, and I already mentioned the pilot program to make sure that people who are getting evicted receive an attorney in court, and that is those issues right there, I think, are enough. But there's a plethora of other things. Earned sick leave, making sure that everybody in Westchester County that has a job has the ability to be sick and still get paid at their job. So if your job is not providing sick time to their employees, they are violating Westchester County law. I can continue. I know you got more questions, but I could go on and on about the work that we've done. And if it was a 30-second elevator pitch, the person probably is out of the elevator and I hope already a voter.
Christopher, if you ever decide to run for president of a union, you got my vote.
Thank you.
Now, I
am a member of the teachers union, so.
Christopher, we have a question here from Jeff Anderson. What is going to be done about Yonkers residents not getting jobs in Yonkers developments? That's a serious problem because a lot of tax rebatements were done, promises were made, you build in Yonkers under the promise that you're going to give the people of Yonkers a job. Of course, jobs that we are capable of doing. If there is an engineer job and we don't have people within Yonkers capable of that job, then hire without. But give people of Yonkers that are capable of doing that job, hire them first. That is not being done. Okay, I have actually, you and I, a few years ago, we went to one of the construction sites. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember on Ashburton Avenue?
On Ashburton.
Yes, you
Um,
were doing the
no,
construction and they did not allow us in.
yes, okay.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, lots of those people working at that construction site, and that's the reason why I invited you to go there, were not from Yonkers. And we wanted to ask them, where are you from? Which we did not need to ask because we could see all the cars parked with plates out of state. Building material that were supposed to be purchased in Yonkers or around Yonkers were not being. They were coming from Philadelphia and far
Mm-hmm.
away. So what are the repercussions for the failures to comply with the promises that were made when negotiations were taking place?
So unfortunately, right, so that's actually a state function. Most of these developers get deals from the IDA, which is a creation of the state. It's a city, quasi-city agency where the mayor, or at the county level, the county executive is the chief operating officer, if for lack of a better term, or the chief executive. But then there's a board that makes all these decisions. And I've always felt that it was unfair that this unelected group of people appointed by the mayor can just give away tax dollars for whatever municipality it is, and then that falls on the backs of everyone else who pays taxes in that municipality. And so that includes everything else in the agreement, where they have to get their material, where their employees need to come from. But one of the things that I introduced when I was on the Yonkers City Council was crafted after federal law, which is Section 3 in the federal law that says if you get money from X level of government, in that case the federal government, that you have to use a certain percentage of local, you have to hire a certain percentage of the people locally, and you have to use a certain percentage of local goods. So I introduced that on the Yonkers side, saying, hey, if you get X amount of dollars, you have to use 20% of that money to hire locally or to buy your goods locally. Because if they bought, the steel or whatever locally, then that local business would have to hire more people and money would flow back into local economy. But that didn't get anywhere. Again, the political will didn't exist. I was on the minority on the Yonkers City Council at the time, and my Republican colleagues didn't want to move that forward. But I don't know that it's been taken up since.
Well, Chris, I don't know at what point we are going to learn, but this keeps happening over and over and over. I don't know how many buildings have been built by the riverfront. And if you go around, you don't see many Yonkers residents working. The jail, the old jail, was purchased under certain conditions and promises that the new owner would make that building available for the local artists to do expos and things like that. It was not used once on that. And seems like there is no consequences. You can make whatever deal you want before construction starts, and then at the end, when things go into operation, you can change everything you want without any consequences whatsoever. Don't you at some point come into play that we need laws that need to handle situations like that?
So I think that's more contractual than it is a law, right? So there's a property that belongs to, in this case, the city. And so when that is transferred to a private entity, that entity needs to be responsible to X standard. And so it is the responsibility of the city to put those things in writing and then have those things executed. At the county level, for example, there's conversations about the county airport and what should happen there. There are some people at the airport, some owners of, I guess, people who own airplanes and certain landings, they want to expand or allow for more planes to have a place to park, so on and so forth. And so if we want to allow them to expand, it's county property, then we need to put everything that we desire in writing. And if it is violated, then there are penalties in writing, so that in a court, they will be held responsible. If we don't put those things in writing, then they're not held responsible, right? It's the same way you make someone a promise verbally and there's nothing to it. But when you put it in writing, there you go. It can be held up in a court of law. And I think we need to make sure that government is doing that same work when we're talking to private institutions, private developers, private owners, that we're putting these things that we deserve, that the people that we represent deserve in writing so that they can be held responsible.
Well, Chris, I don't think those contracts are being done, out of a handshake. I'm sure that is written somewhere. So and those monies that we are giving away, it's taxpayers' money. Okay?
Right.
I understand that we're making it comfortable so they can come and invest, but we need to make sure that all the promises are fulfilled at the end of when the building is put in operation. Because that is a double sword here. We give my tax dollars away, the buildings are made, then I have to move out of Yonkers because I cannot afford to live in those buildings that I gave tax concessions to the new owners of the building.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see this right now. We're handling a situation similar to this at the county. Everybody knows about Rye Playland. And so for the people I represent, it is a big deal because so many of our children and young people actually work there. In addition to the fact that we take our families to Rye Playland to enjoy a summer experience, a local theme park, right? Well, the former county executive entered into an agreement with a private institution, and this county executive came in with this board of legislators and said, wait, we don't believe that you have fulfilled the promises in that contract. And so we took them to court, and we have been fighting it out in court. And so now we're soon to get a document from this private institution that settles and cures all of the problems that they have not dealt with over the last several years. So that's what we need to do, and we need to be more consistent about that. Look, we have an agreement, we have a contract, it's in writing, you have violated it, so we will then exit the agreement or we will sue you accordingly.
Now that we talk about housing, let's also talk about homeless, because homeless, I understand that it is a Yonkers problem, but it is also a county problem, and there is lots of people that are homeless that are coming to Yonkers, and we have lots of people in Yonkers that are homeless, not because they don't work, it's because they can no longer afford the rents in Yonkers. But homeless issue is a county issue. What is the county doing to alleviate the homeless issue, not just in Yonkers, but in the Westchester County?
So if you'll allow me, I'm going to take a step back here because you entered the affordable housing space. So I want to reference again the fact that if it wasn't for that I was the sponsor, the lead sponsor, and I led the charge in the current housing ordinance that exists in Yonkers. If you go back, everybody knows about the DSEG case in the 80s, but coming out of that, there was nothing that mandated developers to build certain types of housing until 2013, when I introduced a bill and got it passed that required all new developments in Yonkers to have at least 10% of their units be affordable. I wanted 20, but the political will did not exist. And I know that it's being updated at this point in time. So I take full responsibility, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to lead that charge in Yonkers. 4,000 new units, 400 affordable units. I wish it was 800 affordable units, but there's at least that many. And so for individuals who, as you said, there are homeless individuals who do work, who have income, but can't afford housing. And so they end up in our system. There's families that are homeless. They end up in White Plains or EHUs, emergency housing units throughout Westchester County, where they live until they can find permanent housing for them and their families. There's the individual shelter system that individuals enter. And if they have income, a portion of their income gets taken from them, but they also receive the mental health or addiction assistance necessary. But then there's the people who don't enter the system. And those are the people that we see most often, right? The people at the library, the people in at the train station, the people in the square at the park. And so those individuals, we need to make sure that we're doing all that we can. I know there was a question yesterday on one of your posts. Someone asked about Lamont. His last name escapes me at this point, but he retired recently. He was the homeless outreach director for the county. I spoke to the deputy county executive 24 hours ago, and I said, hey, what's going on with this? They're interviewing people to replace him right away. Do you have a question? Interrupt me at any point.
I have a question. Chris, I'm not sure, but I don't think you ever been homeless, right?
I have not personally.
And
I've been close, but I have not.
Thanks God, I have never been homeless. Been close, but never been homeless. But I have spoken to lots of people that are homeless. And shelter is not a fun place to be, okay? Instead of giving people, well, it's okay to give people shelter, but I think it would be much better to give those that work an opportunity or a way to rent a place, okay? Because shelters are not safe, people are scared, and lots of people that are on the street sleeping under the bridge, it's not because of lack of shelter. It's because it's more dangerous being in a shelter than actually being under the bridge. Okay.
So let's actually talk about that, right? So that goes to the EHUs that I talked about, the emergency housing units. So if you enter our shelter system, the county shelter system, and you have no problem giving all of your information, so your name, if you have ID, providing your ID, your social security number, so on and so forth, where you work, if you have employment, or where you receive your income, if you get social security or something like that, then you can enter our shelter system, and we will provide you with temporary housing. But a number of people have issues with that because they're mandated to go to their mental health classes, for lack of a better word, or to get the addiction services that they need to. And they have to provide a portion of their income. And oftentimes that portion is large, and they want to keep money for themselves, right? We all want to save. We all want to have money so that we can eat the things we want to eat, or go to the movies, or enjoy our lives, right? Well, pre-COVID. And so the problem is that what I actually have introduced an idea that exists in New York City, bringing that to Westchester, that we still take that portion of their income, but instead right now it goes into the state's general fund so they can use it for whatever they want, that we put in a savings account for those individuals, and that when they find housing, we use it as a security deposit for first and last month's rent, or we assist them in buying furniture or something of that nature. So I'm currently having meetings and conversations with our state legislators, with our county partners, to see what we can do to mimic New York City's, what New York City has at the state level. And that would take state intervention for that to happen. And so a number of individuals, like you said, it is not the drop-in shelter, they may not feel safe, but our shelter system, you get your own apartment. You have your own space that is yours with a door that locks. And so that is not an issue there. People that go into our drop-in shelters may feel that way. But I will tell you that the YWCA, which has the contract for the women's drop-in at their location and the men's drop-in at 68 Palisade, known to others as Kingdom Christian Cultural Center, that they would argue that their facilities are safe and are up to standard. And I would tend to agree with them.
Well, Chris, don't go to New York City as a template of how to do things, because for what I understanding, de Blasio were sending homeless to Yonkers. So perhaps we want to send homeless to New York City if the template that they are using is good and it's working. No?
Well, I'll say this, right? What every municipality does is not perfect, but if there's something good that you can take from somewhere else, then you take it, right? And then what I would add on is, if New York City is sending their homeless people to other places, right? Not just Yonkers, but to other places, and they're providing housing, then they're no longer homeless, right? And so the idea is that we make sure individuals are not homeless, that they have a place to live, and they have the resources that where they can provide a good life for themselves. So I want to just, probably take a step back from thinking, hey, New York City's sending their homeless people here. New York City is providing housing in Yonkers, in this case, for people that were formerly homeless in their place. So if those individuals can come here and be productive members of society, live a good life, you know, and become members of the Yonkers community, then so be it. And there are requirements, from my understanding, to be able to participate in that. You have to have a job. You have to have the ability to, when they look at your future earnings, to say that you will be able to upkeep the apartment that you live. So we're not just giving you this apartment for a year and then 365 days from now, you'll be homeless, but not in New York City. So I think there are some things that we're not actually looking at that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to when we talk about the realities of these programs.
Well, Chris, perhaps you and I should go around around Yonkers, and I can introduce you to a couple guys that are on the street, no apartment, and they came from New York City. Now, let me ask you a question that comes from Lorraine Lopez. This is what she asks. Is there a long-term plan for the homeless? Not so much what programs are available, but specifically, what are the long-term plans?
So, I mean, I can't speak to an individual and their right to live, how they want to live. But I will say this much, that what we saw, we knew that the sharing community was going to close, that St. John's Church was going to end their contract. And so there needed to be, and that the sharing community itself was disbanding and would no longer exist as a nonprofit agency. So all of those things needed to be cured. We gave the contract that the sharing community used to have to the YWCA, who was running a women's drop-in shelter, right? And so most of, if we're honest, there are some women, I don't want to say there are none, but there are some women, most of the people that we're seeing are men, right? So the YWCA was clearly doing a good job with the women's drop-in. And so we said, hey, you can have the men's drop-in as well, but where are you gonna put it? They identified a location on St. Cashmere Place, and it needed to be built out. So the temporary site, as I stated, was 68 Palisade. But the St. Cashmere site had problems with the city. And this is where the city does need to take responsibility. The city was like, oh, this can't open because we have issues with the property owner. And now they're saying this can't open because we have issues with the zoning. Well, look, the reality is, if we want to make sure that we help homeless people here in Yonkers, we need a place, a location where we can help them. And this space is being built out so that people have individual rooms to deal with the reality that you talked about, the fear of going into a place that is unsafe. It has kitchen space, it has lounge space. You know, we talked a couple years ago about the homeless being woken up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning and being kicked out of the shelter. One of the first things that happened when I became a county legislator was that stopped. The shelter, the drop-in shelter, is open all day long. Individuals have a place to stay. They can go there and they can be present there. The reality is, you put somebody outside at 6:30 in the morning, there's nowhere for them to go. And so they end up at the train station, they end up at the library, and then they're charging their phone at 9 a.m. Well, they can stay in the facility because I said to the county executive, hey, we need to make sure that these facilities remain open because these individuals need a place to go. So we continue to do that work. I need to make sure it is my number one priority to make sure that this facility opens and that that the drop-in moves there. And so we can see and understand what the reality of people will be once that happens, and we can move on to the next part.
Now, a statement, I don't know if this is a statement or it's a question or hybrid, you know, half and half.
Right.
And he tells me, Jeff Anderson tells me that's his last question. This is what it says. Under the ETPA, Emergency Protection Act, landlords supposed to offer residents a 1 or 2 year lease. What can be done to stop landlords from not registering apartments and not raising rents over $2,300 a month?
You know, that is an extremely good question. And I know I did some work when I was on the council in making sure and expanding ETPA protections here in Yonkers. So I would have some conversations with some of the members that I've had the ability and the privilege to appoint to the Rent Guidelines Board. And my understanding is that we've had zeros the last few years, which is an amazing reality in those units. But to make sure that we continue to monitor the registered units, which we will do with the state, to make sure that these landlords are being held responsible and not raising their rents as they're supposed to. For those who don't understand or who don't know the issue, rents can only be raised a certain amount in these units, in ETPA units. And so what happens is, especially in a growing city like Yonkers, property owners want to get to that threshold, which I think, as the question stated, $2,300, so that they can then raise the rents to whatever the market rate is, instead of making sure that these individuals who are often low income can remain in their apartment for whatever they've been paying, with small increases over time. So we continue to monitor that to make sure that landlords are not going crazy and that residents can stay in their affordable units.
Now, let me make a statement here. I guess it's a statement / clarification from your assistant, Shatika Parker.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is what she says. He's not talking about mimicking New York City homeless plan. He's interested in allowing people to have savings accounts while they stay in the shelter instead of them paying for the shelter system, which is a program New York City has started.
Correct. And here I want to give a shout out to Shatika, because she is an amazing translator for me, for people who don't need. And if you call my office, you'll often get the opportunity to speak to her. And she is a delight, and she will make sure that she takes care of any issues that we possibly can. So thank you, Shatika, for helping clarify.
Now, what else, Chris? What else are the things that, if you are reelected, because look, I'm asking you a whole bunch of questions. Some of those questions probably have nothing to do with county legislation. But the facts are, at the end of the day, I am going to vote for you based on...
Thank you.
Based on, do I like him? Do I trust him? Because many people, including myself, which are not political savvies, I don't understand. And I would vote for you if I trust you that
Right.
You're going to do the job that it's best for the people of Yonkers, regardless if my question is related to a county legislator or not. People very often vote based on, do I like him? Do I trust him? Is he going to do whatever is best for the people of Yonkers?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And so that is why, in my time in government, so I've been elected, if you did the math, 6 years on the Yonkers City Council, and now 3 years behind me at the County Board of Legislators. So that's 9 years in public office. And I have always been about making sure that I can be present as much as possible, showing up at events, going where people are so that I can be with them and have the conversations. And that's why when you invite me to go somewhere and talk to some people, I'm down. I make sure that I'm willing and able to do it. But obviously, this time of COVID has tremendously limited the ability to do that. But I continue to do my best to make myself available. I'll take this opportunity to share my information, and I hope I'll share it again at the end. But you can contact me on social media at HON Chris Johnson. That's my Instagram, and my Twitter at HON Chris Johnson, or you can find me on Facebook. I have a public page or my personal page. You can send me a message, or you can call my office, 914-995-2895, or send me an email at caj3@westchestergov.com. And my goal is to be responsive, to get back to you, to have a conversation. Everybody is not going to agree with me. I'm not going to agree with everybody. Everybody's not going to like every decision that I make, but I make one promise that I will explain why I made a decision, why I took a vote, why I stand on, a specific, take a certain stance on a specific issue, and why I think that's right. And I hope that the integrity of that reality, that I do not shy away from any question, and I will answer it. And if I don't have the answer, I'll tell you I'll get back to you, and I will get back to you. I hope that that's enough for people to believe and find trust in me.
Well, I must say that every time I reached out to you, you were always responsive. You know, every time I invited you for an interview, you always accepted. You never asked me what questions are going to be asked. So you answered the questions that are dynamically placed in front of you. So for that, I thank you. Now, I have a question here from Hector Santiago, the
Hey,
creator of Stop and Shake, and AKA Hector the Connector. I'm glad that he's on this interview and the battery on his phone did not die, because that phone dies all the time, but not today. And this is what he asked. Now, his question goes in line with something that I have brought up many times with the councilwoman Corazon Pineda and Shanae. And this is what he asked. Is there any way for a tenant to look up the property owners like New York City and HPD? If I am going to rent an apartment, before I rent it, I would like to know the record of that landlord. Just like a landlord can check my credit record in order to decide, do I rent it to this person or not? I would like to be able to check the record of that landlord to know if it's somebody who has lots of fines, penalties, does not take care of the building, does not give heat in the winter, no super, how many complaints,
right.
all of those things. Why can't we, as a prospect tenant, check on the record of a landlord, but the landlord can check on the record of a prospect tenant?
So that goes to the legislation that I voted on when I was on the city council. The what we coined the Bad Landlord Registry, which would take all of the violations that any landlord in Westchester County has and put them in one place. I'm not sure where it is in its movement of actually becoming a real thing. I know that I voted for it. It was introduced by the majority leader, Councilwoman Corazon Pineda Isaac, and I think that at this point it's on the buildings department and the city's IT department to make sure that that becomes a reality. And that goes back to the reality that the buildings department is understaffed at the city level. But again, a city issue that I will provide whatever support I can at the county level, whatever expertise or advice, but I don't have direct legislative oversight.
Primary is coming up July.
June
Or June
2nd, I believe.
June 22nd. Christopher Johnson is the person. I'm sure that you think he is. And what are other things, Christopher, that you think about working on? Look, we have a problem with education. I don't know if that falls into your lap. There is a crime in Yonkers. There is the bail reform. We have lots of issues. Of those issues, which ones are part of your responsibilities and that you're going to be working on it?
So actually, I think I'm glad that you mentioned bail reform. So we supported, I led the charge of supporting a resolution for bail reform at the county level. And I think what people don't understand about this issue is that we're not talking about individuals that have been convicted of a crime. We're talking about people that have been arrested, right? And so according to, this country that we live in, you are innocent until proven guilty. And honestly, this comes out of the Khalif Browder, I don't even want to say story, the reality that happened to this young man who was arrested for allegedly stealing the purse, snatching a purse, and his family could not afford bail. And so he was in Rikers Island for over a year, I believe 2 years, and then the charges were dropped. So he spent more time in Rikers Island than he would have spent if he was convicted of the crime that he was arrested for and did not actually commit. Charges dropped. He comes home and he can't bear with living his life anymore, and he takes his own life. The reality is we have two systems in this country. We have a system for the rich and a system for the poor. Oftentimes, the system for the poor overlaps with the system for people of color, unfortunately. And so when you are arrested, if you are rich and you commit a horrific crime, you can write a check so that you don't have to spend the night in jail. But if you are poor and are allegedly and are arrested for allegedly committing a crime that you may not have committed, as we know a number of individuals who are poor, who are Black, who are brown, that is their reality. They don't have the means to have those funds to get out of jail. And so we clearly have a system that is unfair, where people who have done heinous crimes can still go home, and people who have done nothing have to spend time in prison or jail. And so what bail reform says is, if you get arrested, because the existence of bail was to make sure you appear at your court appearance, that you are not a flight risk. So if you are going to show up at your court appearance, and you are not a danger to society, then you can go home. And here is when you are to appear in court. And this has happened in other communities where 98% of those individuals have showed up in court.
Well, Chris, I don't think that the bail reform is a bad thing. I don't think that no one disagrees with bail reform. I think that the disagreement is with the way bail reform or how it was done. Okay, that's the problem. Like in Yonkers, multiple, the same kid or the same person have been arrested multiple times for the exact same offense. And very often that offense is carrying a fully loaded handgun, a firearm. The person gets arrested today, gets released tomorrow, gets arrested in 2 weeks, gets released in a couple of days later, then he is rearrested again. Now, when are we going to stop? Does that person actually has to kill somebody in order to be fair to the system? How do you see it?
So full disclaimer, I am not an attorney, and I did not write the legislation that exists at the state level. But my understanding,
but you are a resident of Yonkers.
And my understanding of the law is that if you are you have a responsibility when you are out on bail, or when you are out on your own recognizance, because there is no bail, that you would not break the law again, allegedly. And so if you are arrested again, that is on the prosecution, the district attorney's office, to make sure you're charged properly, and you can be held, right? So now we're talking about the discretion of the courts, the discretion of the district attorney. We're not just talking about the bill as it is written.
Are you saying that the judge always has discretion? Because my understanding is, if you're arrested today and you go in front of Judge A, and then you are released, and then you get rearrested in 2 weeks, now you're going to Judge B. Now, Judge B might not even see Judge A's decision.
Why? So that's up to the prosecution. If you've been arrested today and you get let go, and the next week you're arrested again, the prosecution knows you were arrested last week. So why don't they tell that to the judge?
But you were not convicted.
You were arrested for this purpose, and so there's a record of this continuing to happen, and so that is up to the district attorney. Again, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not 100% sure, but it doesn't sound like that. Like the law is being carried out in its full intent in a situation like that.
So but again, you're not an attorney, so you're not sure of if you are correct. I could be wrong myself. I'm just asking the questions. So, Christopher, it's an hour. We've been talking for an hour.
Oh man, we could do this again.
We should do this again.
Absolutely.
So in closure, I'm going to give you whatever time you feel you need to tell the people of Yonkers why you are the best person and you counting on them. I know I asked this question multiple times.
Absolutely, and I appreciate it.
But I'm sure that you're going to repeat these many, many more times. Okay, so take this opportunity to talk to the people of Yonkers and tell them why you.
So again, I want to thank you for having this platform. I want to thank Yonkers Voice for allowing me an opportunity to come and share the work that I've done as a county legislator and as a city council member in the past. I look forward to continuing that work and expanding on that. I am not I do not pride myself on being, the smartest person in the room, but I do pride myself on being somebody who will listen to the concerns of his constituents, and who will work hard in making sure that we answer the call, to make sure that we're there, and that when you have an issue that we can respond. And if we don't have the answer, we'll get the answer to you. Again, I want you to know that you can reach out to me. My office number is 914-995-2829, or email me at caj3@westchestergov.com, as well as reach out to me personally on social media, at HON Chris Johnson, HON Chris Johnson on Instagram, Twitter, or find me on Facebook, and let's have a conversation. Feel free. As stated here, I'm not afraid to answer any question. And again, if I don't have the answer, I will search for it and get it to you. And I want to be honest with you. And I'll do my best to continue to represent this district to the best of my ability.
So also let me take this opportunity to say that Yonkers Voice does not endorse or oppose any candidate. Our take is to inform the people, so the people of Yonkers can make an informed decision on who deserves their votes. Also, let me take this opportunity to invite anyone that is seeking public office or seeking a platform where they can speak about their concerns and issues. Please reach out to Yonkers Voice at yv.support@yonkersvoice.com. If you want to come on a platform, you're running for the public office, reach out as well, so we can make that happen and we can inform the people of why you think you're the best person for the job. So Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you. Question to you. Do you plan on having forums where multiple candidates can come and have a conversation with each other and you?
Definitely. Sometimes getting that done, it's a little complicated, but there is nothing that I would enjoy more than have multiple, candidates come and challenge each other, so we, the people, can filter things out and say, okay, that's the one or that's the one. Definitely a good suggestion. If we decide to do that, would you accept our invitation, Chris?
Absolutely. It would be my pleasure.
So thank you guys for watching. Until next time, don't forget that tomorrow we have a very interesting interview. It's a roundtable between Shanae Williams and John Rubel. They're going to explain all the problems, issues, clarifications in regards to housing here in Yonkers. Thank you, and until next time, Chris.
Take care. Thank you.
Take care.